onerous responsibility the Constitution places on the President and make a suggestion on what I think has become an endemic failure of constitutional democracy in our country. Article 91(3) provides that the President shall, in the exercise of executive authority of the state, 1. Respect, uphold, and safeguard this Constitution. 2. Safeguard the sovereignty of the Republic of Zambia. 3. Promote democracy and enhance the unity of the nation. 4. Respect the diversity of the different communities of Zambia. 5. Promote and protect the rights and freedoms of a person. And 6. Uphold the rule of law. Article 92(1) provides this duty for the President. It says the President shall perform with dignity, leadership, and integrity. I insist, with dignity, leadership, and integrity, the acts that are necessary and expedient for or reasonably incidental to the exercise of the executive authority, which is conferred on the President by the Constitution. The Republic of Zambia will need to know, or may wish to know, that the Republican President bears the most onerous constitutional responsibility of making sure that the constitutional order that we set for ourselves by enacting Act Number 2 of 2016 is protected, preserved, and developed. That means even the other functions of governance, they should also endear themselves to what the President for the time being is doing to make sure that we protect our constitutional order. What we have seen since the coming into power of the UPND government is that there's been preaching about constitutionalism, there's been preaching about the rule of law, but what you face yourself with on the ground is a complete contradistinction from what they've been preaching about. For several times we have called on the President to lead the agenda of ensuring that this country is managed according to the Constitution and that this country is managed according to the rule of law. At the beginning, we were saying that it would appear that the UPND wanted to implement a dual legal system or a dual constitutional system, where if they have to deal with the Patriotic Front, it doesn't matter what they take into account. For them, as long as they achieve the end game, they would not do anything that is akin to respecting the Constitution, that is akin to respecting the rule of law, that is akin to enhancing the freedoms and liberties that those who are members of the Patriotic Front and those who support the Patriotic Front are going to enjoy. What we are dealing with lately are basically illegalities from the beginning to the end. I can cite a few examples. The nation has not forgotten what happened in the case of Kabushi and Kwacha, where there had been nullifications of the seats of our two colleagues, and our two colleagues had taken up the matters in court. And while the matters were in court, the ECZ was persuaded to put into place a mechanism of organizing a by-election, even when the cases were actually in court. We tried to raise protests that time. Our lawyers were in court in and out, and the courts were giving us an assurance that the matters were going to be resolved before the Kabushi and Kwacha by-elections took place. Lo and behold, while our lawyers were shifting and shifting between courts or among courts, because there were three courts that were involved. There was the Court of Appeal, there was the High Court, and there was a Constitutional Court. They were up and all over trying to secure some sort of court pronouncements on the rights that our candidates had to participate in the electoral process. But what transpired, even when those processes were taking place, the UPND was in top gear, led by the Republican President, campaigning in Kabushi. And when the court made a pronouncement, they made a pronouncement that suggested that no jurisdiction to hear the matter because the time had elapsed. And we were disenfranchised as a Patriotic Front, or rather we were denied the right to sponsor a candidate as a Patriotic Front, and the people in Kabushi were disenfranchised. This has repeated itself. In Kawambwa, you have seen what is going on. During when the chairmanship was presented for election, we took the matter up in the Chinsali High Court and obtained a stay of execution of the decision by the ECZ to call an election for the council chairperson in Kawambwa. The ECZ was not persuaded. They went ahead organized that election, conducted it, even when there's an order of the High Court staying that election. The same thing has repeated itself. Right now, the country is busy trying to participate or to organize the participation, led by the ECZ in Kawambwa for the Kawambwa Central seat, whose the MP is incarcerated but has obtained orders, including an order of stay of any election in Kawambwa while he's challenging the decision to call an election in the High Court. The High Court has been defied with impunity. The ECZ, including the chairperson of the ECZ, are in Kawambwa right now, organizing an election and designing it in such a way that they've tilted it in favor of the party in government so that they can gain support for the UPND in the upcoming election in Kawambwa. We still have taken legal matters before the courts of law, although now we are very worried because it doesn't make sense to keep going to court when you know that there are people who are so ill-intended to defy what the court is going to do in terms of meting out justice in the court. But we have done two things. We have gone to court to challenge what is going on, but we've also, through the umbrella of TONSE, decided, even if this is a process we consider illegal, we will participate in it for political purposes only. But you see the determination with which this government would like to ensure that even if the courts have made decisions, those decisions, if they're not in favor of the party in power, they will be defied not only by the party in power, but they'll be defied by even the institution that is supposed to be an independent electoral commission, because it is now presided over, as people have been arguing, by cadres of the party that is in power. The most dangerous thing that has happened recently is the calling, although we haven't been informed officially, but the calling or the declaration of a vacancy in Petauke Central constituency, Honorable JJ Banda's constituency. Chair, the expectation from us was that they are going to allow the process of the due process of the law to take place and secure that at least JJ Banda challenges that decision, to ensure that at least the declaration of the seat as vacant in Petauke is done not by the Speaker of the National Assembly, but by the Constitutional Court itself. When we heard that there was an indication, there was that ultimatum that was given to JJ Banda, we came and announced that we had instructed lawyers to take up the matter in court because we feel, and we still continue to feel, that the Speaker has no powers to declare a seat vacant before the Constitutional Court makes that pronouncement. As we are in court, we have been informed that the Speaker has notified the ECZ that the seat of Petauke Central has fallen vacant and there should be a by-election. These are all violations of the law. These are all violations of the Constitution. If you add to this the economic sector of our nation, so many transactions have taken place that needed the supervision of the National Assembly pursuant to Article 210 of the Constitution. I can mention here the KCM transaction has proceeded without parliamentary supervision or ratification. The dual carriageway has proceeded without parliamentary ratification. The most controversial transaction is the Mopani transaction that has proceeded without parliamentary ratification. And you can add to it, there's a story that the Gulf Stream is probably been disposed of without parliamentary ratification. If it has been disposed of, it's a suspicion, but we don't see that the Gulf Stream, it is not being used by the Republican president. So it is suggested that even that item that belongs, or the asset that belongs to the nation, has been disposed of without parliamentary approval. There is a reason why there's a provision of Article 210 in the Constitution. It is because we, as representatives of the people, must superintend any decision by the executive to dispose of or to restructure the shareholding of a company which is an asset of the public, which is owned by the citizens of the Republic of Zambia. The arguments that have proceeded so far in justifying, especially the Mopani, the Mopani transaction, are nothing less than a scandal. The minister has struggled and has chased everybody around to try and justify the transaction that has taken place. Even when a member of parliament is appearing before the radio to justify why we think this is an objectionable transaction, the minister has taken to the airwaves to call into the radio station to try and justify why this transaction has gone on, and using the argument that the Attorney General has given a clearance of that transaction. It has been explained to this minister, and I hope that they can take that explanation seriously, that even that opinion does not save them. I've just been studying the transaction, close range, and I've looked at it from a perspective of the Companies Act. The argument that has been pushed forward is that this wasn't a sale. Rather, it was subscription of shares, because shares additional shares were issued and they were given to a third-party company called IRH. Now, if you read the Companies Act, it has clear provisions of how you allot shares which you issue in addition to the authorized share capital of the company. What we have now been told is that ZCCM, which is the shareholder of Mopani, caused Mopani to increase its shareholding by creating additional shares which were then allotted for subscription to a third party. That is in clear breach of Section 144 of the Companies Act. When a company issues shares, it is not allowed, it's mandatory for the company to issue new shares and allot them to the existing shareholders, because there's need for you to maintain control of that company. So this argument that is being pushed around, that no, this wasn't a transaction, rather what transpired is that this company only issued shares and gave them to a new shareholder who effectively took control of the company, is as illegal as it is unconstitutional. Now, why have I narrated all these incidences? I've narrated these incidences to create the picture that for the UPND, compliance with the Constitution, reliance with the law, is only important for them if it suits them. In other words, for them, the Constitution is not an imperative dictate. It is something that they can use at convenience and dispose of if they don't need it. Article 210 is mandatory. You cannot transact any government asset or any public asset without ratification of Parliament. For them, they've gone ahead, structured the deals in such a way that it avets or circumvents parliamentary approval. And for them, they want to justify it on the basis that this is not a transaction. Well, we've just pointed out this is a breach of the Constitution. I have pointed out the fact that the Kawambwa elections that have taken place, the two of them, are in breach of the Constitution. Now, how does that relate how does it operate in relation to what I said earlier about the responsibility that this Constitution places on the President? The President is supposed to ensure that everything that is happening in this country complies with constitutional order, complies with the law. And in my assessment, he is failing to do that. This also extends even to how we lost leadership in Parliament. The Parliament has got provision in Article 74 on how you set up leader of opposition in Parliament. But with the connivance of all institutions of the state, the Patriotic Front has lost control of this Parliament insofar as being the opposition party in Parliament is concerned. Now what you have seen is this chaos that has now arisen in Parliament, where the opposition has got no discernible leadership, and everything that is going on in Parliament has become like routine rubber stamping, because we're not providing effective and credible checks and balances. And when this is happening, the President is seen in all places, together with the person who's now purporting to be leader of opposition in Parliament. They were in Northwestern Province some 2 months ago. They were in Wapura Province about 10 days ago. And you could see that within the precincts of where the President is, the leader of opposition, so to say, is making declarations that are wholly unconstitutional. And the President embraces that. And this, draws its origin from what happened on the 24th of October 2023, which I've spoken to the country so many times about, that convention itself is a creature of what is going on. And those matters were taken to court. The courts have been vacillating up to today. There is no discernible decision we're expecting from the court in determining whether what happened on 24th of October 2023 was constitutional, was legal, and by extension complied with Article 60 of the Constitution that provides for intra-party democracy. Now, when Article 91 and 92 that I've quoted places all these onerous responsibilities on the President, why has the President sat back when the Constitution has been breached with impunity, not only by his office, but by other institutions such as the ECZ? And then the judiciary is afraid to make determination in keeping with the constitutional powers that they have under the Constitution. So today I came to make a call to the President, and I mean this well, because we as Patriotic Front members of Parliament are now caught in two places. One, we have sworn to uphold the Constitution. And all our activities in the last 1 year, or 3 years rather, were intended to ensure that we protect and preserve the Constitution. Two, we have an oath of allegiance to the office of a president. And we have repeatedly said that these two oaths are now clashing. What am I going to do as a member of Parliament? What is Honorable Munduvire and Honorable Kafwaya going to do as members of Parliament? when our oath to uphold the Constitution seemingly continues to clash with our oath of allegiance to the office of a president? What should we do? We are caught in between. But what I would like to maybe do is to make a call on the Republican president. Maybe it is time for us to suspend the Constitution. Maybe it is time for us to suspend the rule of law, because it makes little sense that the country is going to demand of those who are in the Patriotic Front and the other opposition, or other citizens who don't seem to be patronizing the UPND, are being expected to religiously comply with the Constitution when those who are within the UPND are not going to comply with the Constitution. It's a disparity. It's a division of the nation. So that, if you breach the Constitution and you belong to where we belong, you're going to face the temerity of your actions. But those who are within the mainstream of power, they can breach the Constitution and walk away from it. We are setting the country up for a bad experience. But if it is going to help matters, I want to make a call on the president that maybe we should consider suspending the Constitution, we should consider suspending the rule of law, we should consider sending the judges and magistrates on leave, because if they can't be allowed to discharge their functions, or if you can create such an atmosphere of fear that they can't carry out the constitutional mandate, then where are we going? Add to it in Parliament. Members of Parliament are not allowed to do anything if they belong to the opposition. Their debates are strictly controlled, sometimes and most of the times curtailed. Your right to debate is determined by the pleasure of presiding officers instead of the people that sent you to Parliament to go and represent them. Is this a constitutional order that we set for ourselves in 2016 when we enacted Act number 2 of 2016? I say no. And if we are going to achieve anything, the president must make sure that he reads for himself again the duty that he's got under these articles that I've quoted. But if it is going to help matters, maybe it is time we consider the alternative. Let's suspend the Constitution, let's suspend the rule of law, and let's send all those constitutional office orders on leave so that maybe we can organize the country by other means other than constitutional order and the rule of law. Those are what the views I wanted to come and share with the people today. I'm so grateful for the opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you for that very passionate submission. I think Honorable Tsanga has underscored that now, as far as we want to preach about the rule of law on the mouth, what we do is very different. And if that's what we do is very different, there is need that we uphold the law. And I think his summary is that the buck stops at the president. He has quoted Article 1991, and 91 is very arrogant in terms of presenting what the president is supposed to do. Whereas all of us are supposed to defend the Constitution according to Article 2, the president has got extra duties to present the Constitution, to protect, safeguard, and make sure that the democracy is promoted. Honorable Tsanga gave a lot of examples, and some of them leading to illegal sales and so forth and the like. As you know, some of you have passed already this route going to Copper Belt. Though they said that those who start operating on 30th, they have already started collecting targets. And they have also borrowed money from which entails that Article 210 was supposed to be used because that's a state asset which has been taken over. And I think he pointed out to a lot of irregularities that have happened, starting from Kawushi and all that. But all it's pointing is to one person. Bakateka Mulikwi, when you are looking away, when the law of law is being, is being abused and not respected. And I think it is common sense that if the president, who has got all those duties, the constitutional duties, according to Article 91, cannot act, it just means that he's the one directing such institutions to abuse the law. And we know that this has been undertaken because of arrogance of numbers in Parliament, because Parliament as an instrument of impeaching the president. And because there is that arrogance of numbers, I think normally. That's why you have aid council. Parliament but under that can't suspend the constitution so that you have a jungle, so that you can. Because if these rules can only be respected by those in opposition and the people that are supposed to be custodian of the law, like the president, with a lot of things on his shoulder, according to Article 91, cannot respect the Constitution, we have a problem. We have a problem. Because the president just manages the institution, the country called Zambia, on stewardship basis. It's not his country. He is supposed to follow the laws that are in there. But you have seen that he is a champion, and maybe that's what Champions League means. He's a champion in promoting lawlessness, where you find that he is recognizing offices which do not even exist. He talked about 74 of how we are supposed to specifically close to, of how the opposition are supposed to come up with their own opposition, leader of the opposition. He also did talk about the institution called DCZ, of how it has given unto itself to interpret the laws. And I think this has not left Parliament, where Parliament has been interpreting laws when the Constitutional Court is there to do these factors. And we have seen that in Parliament and many other institutions is overlooking a lot of court orders and many other factors. And I think in summing up, Honorable Tsanga, our counsel, said, hii lechitika kukawambwa. Vasisi that banked on saying to alako nkanyapo because of the court ruling. But mumamu inena wasalamu, and no, this is where we are supposed to know that there is serious abuse of the law. The same judgment they have banked on had indicated that the period of 90 days cannot be realigned, neither can it be extended. So they just chose what suited them, where they said that no legal process should stop this process to go ahead. But what of the one which talked about you can't extend the 90 days and you cannot realign the 90 days? So in doing so, Honorable Tsanga scored all those as illegalities, and I do agree with him 140% that this is illegalities to ice order. But in the president, having said that, I would like to ask Honorable Gafwaya to also add the voice on the issues that he has prepared. And I'm sure, as I said, that this is a time for budgets, and we have to also look at issues of the budget and many other factors. Honorable Gafwaya, sir.
Thank you so much, Honorable Fube, for offering me this opportunity to have my say on this very important press briefing. Honorable leaders, I would like to recognize you as I do the media. And let me begin by adopting the discourse tendered by Honorable Tsanga as my own. Last week, when we had the chance to speak to the nation through the media, we, particularly myself and Honorable Mundubida, we raised some of the issues which have been troubling us, and we said that we will be coming back to speak to each one of those issues and demand for government to bring closure to those matters. But emerging issues are too compelling today. I will be unable to start addressing those individual items because of emerging issues. I have observed that in the recent past, we as a nation have begun to lose donor support. We have begun to lose donor support because of bad governance, poor governance, and also the poor fight against corruption. So in addition to what Honorable Tsanga has said, I would like to call upon the President to begin to restore the image of our country in the eyes of the donor community. If the President manages to restore the image of our nation, we may have a situation where we would be able to restore donor support. If this donor support continues to fall, our budgets may not be met. 2024 budget may collapse. 2025 budget may not be realized because there is a component of donor support there. Here is how. I would like to propose to the President in terms of how he can achieve the rebuilding of the image of our nation in the eyes of the donor community. I think that the President needs to explain the steps he is taking or he is going to take to ensure that the fight against corruption becomes a real fight against corruption and not a fight against the PF. If the President establishes that and he causes its implementation, it is likely that the donor community may listen to him and they may begin to support our country again. But since the Anti-Corruption Commission and other law enforcement agencies are already having active cases, I would like to recommend to the President that he should expose the corrupt ministers. This is the time where now you have lost, the confidence by the donor community is now, going down. This is time now for you, Mr. President, to expose your ministers who are corrupt. The thieving ministers. Expose them, fire them, replace them, and ensure that they are properly investigated. Only then are you going to manage to restore credibility of the fight against corruption and also restore the image of our country as one which does not tolerate corruption. Because you can't be saying you don't tolerate corruption when your ministers are appearing before the Anti-Corruption Commission and you are hiding their names. It is now you who should expose them. Your ACC has failed to expose them. So you now take the lead, Mr. President, expose them. Tell us which ministers so that we can know those minister about UPND. I would also like to encourage the President to ensure that you abandon the restraint in the promotion of transparency and accountability. This is time to be fully accountable to the people. This is time to be transparent to the people. Remember, Mr. President, that we the Zambian people are not happy in the manner in which AFRICOM came to this country. We are not happy. Not to say AFRICOM could have never come to the country, but there needed to be accountability. There needed to be transparency. But I just mentioned AFRICOM as an example. I would like to remind you that this afternoon, the budget, the appropriation bill has passed the second reading. That means that literally the budget is approved, because I don't expect any member of parliament to raise any amendment to the appropriation bill, because this is a government bill. This is a bill that has passed the cabinet approval. And for us, we think that the numbers that you have placed on each one of those heads is what you desire to spend in 2025. So none of us will raise any amendment. So this budget has passed. But do you know, Mr. President, only one member of parliament, one out of 156 plus nominated members, only one has been allowed to debate the appropriation bill. One member.
It's a shame.
One. So you have a situation where the national budget, this one, has only been debated by one person out of the 156 plus 8 nominated members of parliament. This is a shame. This is not transparency. This is not accountability. And I say so because there is no other stage where Zambian people will have a chance to say anything about this appropriation bill, because you only debate a bill at second reading, and you can debate the the amendments if any member raises an amendment. But as I said, this being a government bill, this being a government budget, we don't want to disturb your thinking. But the sad part is you are hiding everything through gagging the people from speaking. Mr. President, I would like to encourage you that all the 810 people who have been reported by FIC to law enforcement agencies should be exposed. Tell the nation who they are, those who are in the theft of billions of kwacha through illicit financial flows. If you tell the people and the steps you are taking in arresting them and taking them through the court process, maybe the donor community may begin to see you as being serious in the fight against corruption. Otherwise, we are in trouble. We are going to lose 100% donor support, and we are going to suffer tremendously as a nation. Let me also recommend that, Mr. President, you need to fire the PS who awarded himself a contract of 6.8 million United States dollars. Fire him or suspend him if you are doubting, and ensure an investigation, thorough investigation, so that the other PSs in the other ministries can desist from thinking that they can award themselves contracts and still be maintained in their offices. Mr. President, I think finally, I would like to recommend that calls for the executive arm of government to start obeying the law. Let them just obey the law. Registrar of Societies, when changing the office bearers, let them just follow the law. Follow the law. The Electoral Commission of Zambia, let them just be following the law. You see, when people follow the law, when players in all industries follow the law, that is what is known as the rule of law, not what you are mistaken of by thinking that thuggery is the only form of the presence or lack of rule of law. No, it is these laws, including this appropriation bill when it becomes an act. All players must follow the law in spending this, not only spending but also collecting revenues and spending the revenues. Following the established laws is what is known as the rule of law. I want to encourage you to even stop thinking that political violence is the only lack of rule of law. That is thuggery, and it should be seen as such. And those people who engage themselves in political violence should be arrested in the same manner that those who engage in illicit financial flows must be arrested and charged appropriately. So don't say when a law is broken in the office, it's the rule of law. It is not the rule of law for the Electoral Commission of Zambia to have a list of registered office bearers, which is a forged one. It's not the rule of law. The Electoral Commission of Zambia must have proper information obtained through the right channels. Mr. President, we are in trouble as a nation. I would like you to take decisive action, and if you may, declare your assets. Because I think if you lead by example, I'm sure it will be good for all of us Zambians, and we should be seen as a serious nation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Honorable Kafwaya. I think the key words by Honorable Kafwaya is transparency and accountability. In terms of transparency and accountability, in terms of transparency and accountability, Honorable Kafwaya has reminded us that the president has failed on that scale. Why he has failed is that he's the champion who should trigger the interest of national values. And the interest of national values means that those that are in Article 8, among them morality, ethics, constitutionalism, and many others. And I think none of such is followed. But the president saying that I'll fight corruption from the past, present, and future corruption. And I think, according to Honorable Kafwaya's submission, the president has totally failed on that one. And I think Honorable Kafaya also talked about the selective approach of what is called corruption and how these institutions are implementing. We know that the president, through Gazette number 1123, gave himself powers where they are supposed to report to him and all that and so forth. But that did not mean that the president should shield those that are before the law and those that have been investigated. So I think we find it a misnomer of some sort that the president is shielding ministers. We know that even as far as the PF was condemned, the ministers that who used to appear under ICC would be exposed. And everybody will know. And even when they are cleared, everybody will know that they have been cleared. But those who are supposed to be angels and champions of the rule of law, as they said, they are not exposing these ministers. And I think you should realize that power is temporary. And one day, the wheels of justice will catch up with those that are seen to be shielded. And I think everybody is emphasizing Wakateka. What is difficult about following the law? What is difficult about, following the constitution? What is difficult about respecting the institutions? We know Wakateka that according to Cap 119, which is Societies Act, you can't go there and change the host bearers without having any elective position. Because even making returns and changing names for a political party, you are supposed to do some elective arrangement, even a conference and the like. But Wakateka, we have seen that you have been recognizing people that have not gone through that particular process. Wakateka pull up the socks. And I think this is very wrong, and the messages today are coming directly to you. We know that you like social media, and I'm sure you are going to listen from what we are saying here. And this is about you, about following the law, and we need to follow the law. If you try to shafinga muleko nkefundi, ngatamule konke fundi Wakateka mkasanga tinafabe ne chala shupano mbokwambo konka ifundi. As Council Tsanga said that first, the suspend the constitution if that is the case. Because the law is not being followed. And I think the buck stops at you. We keep on talking about you because we know that you are a parent, and according to what has been given to you in 91, you are supposed to obey. And all these things are interconnected. But we keep on talking, and people, of course, some of the young people that follow you blindly, they seem to be saying that we are crybabies. We are not. We are only talking about those we are trying to defend the nation according to the law that have been given. We are members of parliament, and we will take on anyone that is going to abuse the law. Is Fela wants to speak before Honorable Mundubile comes in? We have been joined by Fela, so that
yes, please.
The people of Fela can be heard.
Yes.
Let us listen from the people of Fela. So
Thank you, Honorable Fove, who's Master of Ceremony. I recognize the presence of the senior party leaders and senior leaders in Parliament from the Patriotic Front. And I also recognize you, our colleagues from the media, and will not take long as we prepare, for the leader of opposition to address us. We are going to the fourth year of the United Party for National Development as a government. Now, one of the things that I want to address is that there has not been an impact of leadership in Zambia by the United Party for National Development, the UPND. The last 3 years has been a waste of time for Zambians. What has been happening is talking too much, and you will agree with me that you, the media, covered Nkosi Amankosi, Chief Mpezeni of the Ngoni people, where he said that there's too much folklore or too much talking on the part of the UPND. I want to emphasize that point, that we have wasted time under these UPND people. I don't know what we can learn from it, but I think God has a big lesson for us. There's been too much talk, arresting opposition leaders, manipulating the judiciary, manipulating the police. The police now have been weaponized as tools of oppressing political leaders. State institutions, lest we forget, such as the National Assembly, the judiciary, other, the Judicial Complaints Commission, have been infiltrated by UPND cadres. Now, and unfortunately, these institutions are only adhering to what Mr. Hakainde said. There's too much, oppression. For anyone who speaks or criticizes government, there's no understanding. Right now, as we speak, it has become commonplace to find people talking about the UPND leaving in 2026. And I'm very sure that each one of us has come to that term. Now, the issue of corruption has been addressed. The UPND not only are involved in corruption, but they speak against it. In one breath they say this thing, and in another breath they are actually doing the same thing. And this, it brings us to question what kind of people these UPND are. Because, you see, would rather expect them to keep quiet, but they condemn corruption, and they're saying they're fighting it, when actually they're not doing anything. Right now, even international forces are actually, withdrawing those who support us in the fight against corruption. A clear indicator that there's nothing happening. So, these 5 years, from 2021 to 2026, it has been a waste of time. Finally, let me also address the issue of international diplomacy with Zimbabwe. Zambia and Zimbabwe have been Siamese twins. Let me put it the way President Sata put it. The meaning of that is that we've been held and meshed together as two countries as one. From the independence struggle into independence to date, we've gone through a lot of the Zimbabweans. The freedom fighters of Zimbabwe were, were kept in Zambia, of course, together with other countries. But since I'm talking about Zimbabwe, ZAP forces were here. In Fera there was Kavalamanja, where we were even bombed, but we didn't care. We helped these people. When we voted SADC, at the Africa Union, even at the UN, Zambia and Zimbabwe vote together, by the way. And this is documented at SADC level. So what has happened today for the UPND Hakainde-led, Hanga-Inde-led government to, sever these relationships? I want to call upon this government to repent, because we cannot afford, to be in bad books with Zimbabwe. And it has just been manifested. This, what I'm saying, has manifested. They expect Zimbabwe to cooperate on things of their interest. When they've stood against Zimbabwe, how can the entire president, miss a SADC meeting just because it's held in Zimbabwe? Anyway, wherever it held, a SADC meeting is more important than attending the coronation of a English chief, this Prince Charles. So I want to just add on that voice and say that the last 5 years, or the current 5-year term of this government has been nothing but a sheer waste of time, because nothing has happened. God is even punishing us through this drought, and I can see, I think, more punishment coming to us because of the UPND. I thank you.
Thank you so much for failure. I was corrected by Honorable Ndebele that is fair, because people may think that he has defected. I think when you look at what he has said, Manuel Valan that situation never that does no medicine. When I was in Doha, Samba, Nango, and Doha, Wakunwa, the door is open. It's free fall. And I think there's nothing that will be done to really correct this situation, because we are only meeting with a few days in between. And when we look at such a situation, the things where we are coming from, the wrong things that have been done, overweighs whatever good can come about. And I think, by and large, everybody is preaching about what Honorable Ndebele would like to recall infidelity to the law. Not fidelity to the law, but infidelity to the law, where you find that our laws have been abused. Our laws, and I think there's this negative warfare against especially the opposition that is so much toxic to our political landscape, such that the politics, I think if we realize, are the ones which create leaders to occupy these offices. The leaders also appoint others, including technocrats, to learn the machinery of government. But we have attacked the very core of the machinery that is supposed to churn out so that we have good governance and democratic governance, that now we are caught in despotic and police state. And I think Emmanuel was very also categorical on good neighborliness, where he talked about we should be in good books with our neighbors. We need each other. And I think there's no need that we should go on to have bad relations with our neighbors. It doesn't pay, especially a neighbor like Zimbabwe, where we have to share a lot, commercially, politically, and many other. I think we are cut from the same umbilical cord, but we seem not to realize that. Having said that, let me not waste much time or let me call upon Honorable Munduvire to address us and sum up on the presser. Honorable Munduvire, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'll start by recognizing the presence of my fellow MPs and members of Central Committee seated in front. Of course, the fourth estate, may I rely on the protocol that has already been established. Countrymen and women, this whole week I think we've been, the newspapers have been graced with headlines, talking about the EU, the US suspending funding to fight against corruption. We've got headlines like the UK pulls aid to Zambia over corruption reports. We heard about corruption under Ministry of Health, in addition to what was already there, the procurement of ambulances and many others. It's very clear that we are in trouble as a country. And at the rate that we are going, it will be very difficult for the UPND government to turn this country around. We started calling the UPND out some time back. And I think my colleagues seated with me here on several occasions would outline a list of things that have happened in the past where we called upon the president to try and correct them. I see that we've arrived at a place where even the donor community is now concerned. Now, we are in this country where within 3 years, there's been reports of suspicious transactions under FIC of 60 billion kwacha, of 68 billion kwacha, of 13.5 billion kwacha, of $2.8 billion. Now, these are suspicious transactions. In the same country, we've seen a lot of excitement, for instance, from the Anti-Corruption Commission and the DPP talking about the recovery of assets amounting to 1.5 billion kwacha. So sometimes you tend to wonder, there's excitement on the recovery of 1.5 billion kwacha and a couple of houses, maybe valued at another $1 million or so. But there's no excitement on the FIC reports talking about 60 billion kwacha, 68 billion kwacha, $2.8 billion, 13.5 billion kwacha. Countrymen and women, I want to draw your attention. This is very, very important. You've seen the excitement from the DPP, SEC. They ran cameras. They've taken Commander Muchemwa's flats. They're all over filming, this property. If indeed they were serious about the fight against corruption, we should have seen them moving swiftly to name the individuals behind these transactions that we're talking about. To put it in context, 1.5 billion kwacha would be about, is it $50 million? Yes. Yes. Huh? $5 million. Yeah. So but you've got $5 million. Yes. But you've got 2.8 billion kwacha dollars, 68 billion kwacha, 60 billion kwacha, 13.5 billion kwacha. Nothing is being said about that. To make things worse, I read a statement today where the president said, we have sealed off all loopholes of corruption. That's why you're seeing these convictions. So I said, wait a minute. Is this the same country where just this week alone, we had reports of a PS awarding himself, gifting himself a contract of $6.8 million? Is this the same country where we learnt of a new motor assembly plant in Garden compound? Is it Garden Motors? Is now assembling Toyota vehicles, leaving, a Toyota Zambia. It's the same country. This is the same country where you import maize from Zimbabwe, from Tanzania, 650,000 metric tons, and money is sent, and only 14,000 metric tons have come. It's the same country. This is the same country where you have 61 containers of medicines procured from Egypt, were procured through a flawed process. Ministers going with briefcases of cash into Egypt, medicines come and they are stored somewhere in a garage. And the president is saying, we have sealed off all loopholes of corruption. So when I listen to the vice president responding on corruption, I look at the statements made by the president, I only came to one realization, that we may not be talking about the same thing. We need to understand, or the UPND need to understand what corruption really is. It looks like corruption in the UPND is so endemic that they don't even realize what they're doing, that they're actually corrupt activities. That's the only reason why, as far as they're concerned, the allegations against the first family and the recovery of 1.5 billion worth of assets is the only corruption that has happened in this country. The 60 billion, 68 billion, $2.8 billion and the rest is not corruption. Why? Because it happened under the UPND. The Garden Toyota. We know that Toyota Zambia is along Nangwenya Road. It's just opposite Parliament Motel, and everybody knows where Toyota Zambia is. And Cairo Road. But people took it upon themselves and created another Toyota assembly plant in Garden. I've grown up in this area the past 40 years. I'm not aware that there's a new assembly plant for Toyota vehicles in Garden. And yet this is where a Ministry of Local Government decided to go and procure ambulances. When we argued through the press to say the Constituency Development Fund Act is very specific on how procurements under the CDF should be done. It should be the ward development committees themselves deciding on what to procure. The moment that decision to procure ambulances, police vehicles and the rest was centralized, we knew that there was a problem. And we called them out to say, this may just be a recipe for corruption. Because clearly the people of Mporokoso have been waiting for that ambulance. The money was spent. If you had allowed the CDF committee of Mporokoso to procure that ambulance would have been here a year ago. And yet the PS is he's got the audacity to say, if the ambulances don't come by May, I will resign. Who tells him that he will still be in office? We are demanding for your removal immediately. That PS must be fired immediately. He's now telling us when he will leave office. The ambulances should have been delivered this year in June. And he's extending by a year, saying, if they're not delivered by May, then I will resign. Your Excellency the President, back in the village, we have a song that we sing whenever there are problems in the village. Sometimes you find you're losing goats, cattle, and many other farming produce. The old people begin to sing a song. Chimumbwa pala 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 wisokuama. Chimumbwa pala pala. By that, they begin to search to try and find out who in the village could have come, may be born in that village, of a father who comes from a difficult family somewhere, so that they thin them out and leave the village to operate normally. I want to make a call to His Excellency the President and the Vice President The people that are committing all these corrupt activities are their appointees. Mother and father, the ministers, the directors, the PSs are your children. I want to make a call that maybe the president and the vice president should take time to introspect, to try and find out why are their children so corrupt? Where is this coming from? The president and vice president must introspect to try and discern where these corrupt tendencies are coming from. Why are the ministers and the permanent secretaries so comfortable to involve themselves in these corrupt activities when we have the president and the vice president? Why are they so comfortable? Why are they so comfortable? So, Your Excellency the President, I want to make this call that it's high time, Your Excellency and the Vice President, you sat down to introspect, have an honest conversation. There must be a reason. They are drawing some comfort somewhere. Because it's all out now. Name it, every sector, there's a corrupt activity. Talk about the energy sector. They were awarding themselves contracts as if they were exchanging peanuts at the market. Ministers were writing letters. Ministers who are policymakers and vision carriers were actually involved in the actual operations of these ministries. We know there's a circular somewhere out there that came from Cabinet Office that enjoins ministers to get involved in work that is supposed to be done by PSs. And this is why we are seeing so much corruption. So difficult questions must be asked. Why is there so much corruption, Mr. President, in your government? Talk about Ministry of Energy. Talk about Ministry of Health. Talk about Ministry of Agriculture. Talk about Ministry of Mines. Talk about Ministry of Finance. Corruption is everywhere. When we started, my brother here, Honorable Kafwa, and I were just struggling with one ministry, and this was Ministry of Finance. Because Ministry of Finance had gone to bed with one mining house, which had stolen, pure theft, stolen $2.5 billion from this country. And its directors had been arrested and detained. Minister of Finance single-handedly made a decision to withdraw that case, and Zambia lost that $2.5 billion. Nothing else has ever been said by that. We struggled with that, trying to push the Minister of Finance to explain the wisdom behind such a decision when we needed all the money that we could. Before long, we got reports from minority shareholders in the CMIH that some mining house was owing ZRA $1 billion. And Minister of Finance again wrote and instructed ZRA to only collect $23 million. Now, if you try to imagine the number of challenges we're going through as a country, and the minister can decide to let go of $2.5 billion, what can motivate such a decision? We have many a time defined what corruption is, not to be a mere giving or receiving of bribes. But when one puts personal interest over and above public interest, and this will come by way of administration, by way of policy and legislation. So when you put that as a test to the decisions that are made in government, you arrive at the conclusion that we did. There was definitely something wrong with the decision that the Minister of Finance made. So this was the beginning. Before long, there were other cases from Minister of Agriculture. Procurement of fertilizer at $50 million. Now, the story behind that fertilizer was already in depots somewhere within the country. When the UPND came in, the fertilizer sitting in those same depots, they simply changed. The value of that fertilizer was $33 million. They gave a contract to their friend, and the price moved from 33 to $50 million. Fertilizer was still in the same place. It never moved. He never spent a single ngwe. There was no value addition. So meaning that we lost $50 million just out of a decision. Remember, the test that we're talking about is that corruption will come through policy, legislation, and administration. Just through that, we lost $50 million. And the individuals behind that decision still had the audacity to come and stand in front of us in Parliament and call us thieves. In English, they say, look at the pot, calling the kettle black. They still had the audacity to stand and say, these are thieves. Remember that they only got into power in September. This $50 million deal happened within September. They were in such a hurry. I'm just trying to highlight that we only had one ministry, and that was Ministry of Finance. Ministry of Agriculture soon joined. It was not long, $100 million at Ministry of Health. President Hakainde Hichilema, many a time, has come on the platform to ask people for evidence. There was an issue at Ministry of Health. A director of a company wrote a letter on company letterhead saying one of your ministers was soliciting for a bribe. They wanted 2 million rands and also a G-Wagon vehicle. What more evidence does the president need? Did anything happen in that particular case? Nothing. Yes. One PS was sacrificed along the way, but the culprits behind that are still there. Under Ministry of Agriculture, there were a number of questionable procurements. There were even consultants who came who were procured under Ministry of Agriculture, who were now determining who gets contract and who gets what. The former Auditor General, Dick Sichembe, could not get cooperation from the PS at Ministry of Agriculture, so that they audit Ministry of Agriculture, because millions of dollars had been pilfered through that ministry. And that PS could not be removed. We challenged Secretary to Cabinet. This is your employee. This is your appointee. Why are you failing to remove them? It looks like his roots were very deep, and he was untouchable. So now we are talking about Ministry of Mines. The corruption in the Ministry of Mines. My dear brother Kabuswe struggled, and I sympathize with him, because it will not be very long. It won't be very long from now that the same way they are celebrating seeing former leaders trekking to court and police stations, it will not be very long from now that the same will happen to them. Because Zambians are documenting. Like my colleague Honorable Chisopa said earlier, the decision by the Zambian people is already made. Make no mistake about it. The UPND is going in 2026. There's no question about it. That is going to happen. The point I'm addressing now is that the same way they're celebrating seeing their friends trekking to courts and police stations, very soon most of our colleagues that are within Parliament will have to walk that route. So the point that I wanted to really address was that President Hakainde Hichilema needs to understand that the many things that we've outlined are actually corrupt activities, or activities riddled with corruption. Because the president is saying he has sealed all the loopholes. But we are outlining what is happening in his government now that is, smacks of corruption. And yet the president can't see. The president doesn't see that to be corruption. Our worry as MPs is that the president, the corruption we are seeing, every other Zambian is seeing, the president doesn't see it as corruption. So we needed to really close that gap. The president doesn't think there's anything wrong with all these billions that we're talking about. Now, colleagues, countrymen and women, it's very important for me to make one point very clear. When we say suspicious transactions, these are transactions that actually happened. They are termed as suspicious transactions because the circumstances under which these transfers are made are not very clear. But the money actually moved. When we say 60 billion kwacha of worth of suspicious transactions, that money actually moved. When we say $2.8 billion, that money actually moved. Now the question is, with the activity level locally, we're wondering, where is this money from? Now, we shouldn't, as Zambians, think that this money is separate from the questionable transactions that we're seeing. For instance, the sale of mines. The illegal sale of mines or the illegal transfer of shares should not be separated from the money reported in the FIC. Because money that is obtained corruptly, money that is obtained illegally, is stored somewhere, okay? It finds its way in the banking system and it has to be moved to some safe haven. So the transactions concerning the illegal transfer of shares in our mines, the sale of gold at airports, are not separate from this money that we're talking about. So on one hand, under the FIC, you are seeing the figures, money is moving. But keep it up, keep a finger on the activities that are happening on the other side. Then you'll be able to see that the importation of maize from Tanzania, which has never arrived, okay, could also be connected to this money. All right? You then be able to see that, for instance, the export of electricity, where the Minister of Energy comes on the floor of the House and gives a different figure as regards how much power they're exporting to what the MD of ZESCO says. So those differences could account for some of the money that we are talking about. When you look at the deals at the Tazama pipeline to do with fuel, they're not isolated from these figures. And this information is for the president. I want the president to know that there's so much corruption in his government. And what is in the FIC report is also connected, for instance, to the export of maize to Congo for no reason. Export of power to these neighboring countries when there's load shedding in this country. You must wonder, there's always a motive. Why should the government export power when the citizens need power? There can only be one motivating factor: the personal interest that those that are in power have. And that would explain so much money that is leaving the country every day. Yeah, so I think lastly, I just want to support the statement and the call that Honorable Chisanga made on the suspension of the Constitution. As a matter of fact, if you look at what is happening currently, there's a constructive suspension of the Constitution, literally. If you see what has been happening at the ECZ, for instance, if you see what's happening at the Registrar of Societies, what's happening at the courts, it's clear that there's some constructive suspension of the Constitution. Nobody's following the Constitution. What they say, the greatness of a nation is judged from its fidelity to the Constitution. The greatness of a nation is judged from its fidelity to the Constitution. Clearly, as a country, the rule of law and constitutionalism is through the window as we speak. Because Honorable Fuwe, for instance, gave an example. You have a judgment from the Crown Court dated 15th of October. In that judgment, the court is saying, as long as a vacancy has been declared, the elections must go on within 90 days. Now remember, as long as a vacancy has been declared, it must be made very clear, a vacancy must be properly declared. Somebody should not just wake up and say, Lukasha, I declare Lukasha Central vacant. And then ECZ begins to run and prepare for an election. It must, first of all, be properly declared. And the Constitution, under Article 72, is very clear on how a seat of an MP becomes vacant. So we expect ECZ to, first of all, interrogate and satisfy themselves that a seat has been properly declared as vacant. Now, the same judgment talks about 90 days, saying you can't realign the 90 days. The 90 days has got to be 90 days. Chilangwa, Kawamba Central, was declared 120 days ago. And yet the election is still going on. The situation in Kawamba is supposed to be a constitutional crisis because of the manner in which that whole matter was handled. The election in Kawamba is unconstitutional because for the first time, we are going to have an election 120 days after the declaration of a vacancy, as it were. So the confusion that is happening in this country, Honorable Chisanga is saying, looking at the conduct of the executive, it's as if there is no law in this country. So maybe, instead of just having one side of the political divide having to comply with the Constitution, why doesn't the president consider suspending the Constitution? Because effectively, if you look at ECZ, you look at the Registrar of Societies and the courts, it's as if there is no Constitution. They've constructively suspended the Constitution. Even during the UNIP time, Kaunda and the UNIP respected the courts. We have never seen courts in this country respected to the extent that they have under the EPND government. You are aware that we had judgments coming out of the Supreme Court convicting the children of Kaunda sitting at State House. Why? Because KK respected the rule of law, he respected the Constitution. But what we have at the moment, willy-nilly, paper tigers will go behind the doors and cause the registrar of societies to change names of office bearers of a political party. That's unheard of. And the following day, you see the president acknowledging and confirming those changes of the registrar of societies. Mr. President, that is unconstitutional. It's a shame that you'd want to participate in illegalities of that nature. On one hand, you are running a corrupt government, a government that is full of corruption. The corruption under your government, Mr. President, is unprecedented, never seen before in this country. On the other hand, you are participating fully in illegalities. You are participating in the alteration of the Constitution. We want to call upon Your Excellency the President, bring order to this country. One, stop the corruption under your government. Number two, can you ensure that constitutionalism is followed? I even wonder why President Hakainde Hichilema is pushing for constitutional amendments. There's really no need to push for constitutional amendments because the current constitution is not being followed. Yeah. If we just even can't follow what is there, what's the point of pushing for constitutional amendments? Yes. I don't see the reason why they must push for constitutional amendments. Yeah, so lastly, maybe I'll talk about the same call to amend the Constitution. The President seems to be in some indecent haste to try and amend the Constitution. Now, it must be understood that there are certain challenges in constitution making that need to be addressed, as it were. Constitution making is, in constitution making, you need a transparency, you need accountability, you need dialogue, and indeed the process may need some legal backing. These are what we call immutable principles in constitution making. But there are no shortcuts to amending the Constitution. The consultative processes where you build trust and build consensus around that process is very, very important. And under new constitutionalism, all other jurisdictions in modern constitutionalism, you are looking at what are called constitutional principles or simply immutable principles in constitution making. So, one, we require to legislate the process of constitution making. The actual process, the actual roadmap must come in form of a bill to Parliament so that, one, the stakeholders can speak to it, and that will help to build trust, because the process, one, when you talk about timeliness within which that constitution should be delivered, it will be enacted into law. The entire process is enacted into law. That helps to build trust. There must be transparency. If you are looking at consultations, who is being consulted? There must be accountability. There also must be dialogue. Are you talking to the church? What exactly is so compelling that you'd want these amendments to come like yesterday? The reason why there are suspicions. The reasons why there are suspicions, one, we have a constitution in place, Constitution Amendment number 2 of 2016. But the implementation of what this Constitution provides leaves much to be desired. And yet we're in a hurry to try and amend this Constitution. And to be able to address some of the concerns that stakeholders are raising, there is need for the executive to come clean on this particular process. You must begin to engage stakeholders, begin to have town hall meetings, begin to educate people on exactly what you'd want attended to. Otherwise, I don't see much happening between now and 2026 if we're to strictly follow the principles that are to be employed in a proper constitutional amendment process. Even the failed Constitutional Amendment Bill number 10, one, there were consultations. Ministry of Justice went countrywide. Political parties had a meeting in Siavonga, Secretary Generals, including the UPND. It was the UPND that actually drafted the communique that came out of Siavonga. There was a stakeholders meeting at Mulungushi. There were several engagements with the church. But yet, the UPND, even after meeting with them for several days at the Law Association of Zambia, they came up and said there wasn't enough consultation and that consensus was not built. So then I wonder how they expect their process to be respected when everything that is being done is shrouded in secrecy. There are backdoor consultations. There is no transparency. There is no roadmap that has been given so far. Remember that the National Dialogue Act was law. It provided for a roadmap and also provided for the National Dialogue Forum. We were meeting at Mulungushi with not less than 455 delegates drawn from civil society, churches, and many other places. And yet the UPND came up and said, we were not consultative enough. So we're very open. We've been waiting, Mr. President, to say, can you give a roadmap so that we can speak to it? Can you bring a bill to Parliament spelling out the roadmap of this constitution amendment process so that we can debate it and speak to it and understand exactly what you'd want to do? So I think that there could be something of concern, because if President Hakainde Hichilema and his government were very clear about this process, they would have been much more transparent in coming to Parliament, meeting stakeholders, and spelling out exactly what they think should be amended in the Constitution. But the manner that this process is being carried out leaves much to be desired. So my call to the President is that suspend this constitutional amendment process immediately. This can be considered later after 2026, and I think a similar call was made by the church. If we are going to come up with a durable constitution, if we are going to come up with a document that is going to stand the test of time, I think we need to have a lot of time, give it a lot of time, going forward. So, countrymen and women, those would be my remarks on today's interaction. I thank you very much once again.
Thank you so much, the opposition. There is a saying in Bemba that says that I think the quote of the day on the Constitution is that President Hakainde Hichilema has more than 20 parts in that Constitution and more than 20 something articles, which he has not implemented. So those that he wants to bring forth, what surety is there that he is going to implement them? I think navena usakira tibaka na wadi audience at Tafibombaso, where you find that you have all the chunk, you have all the portions, then enough now if you Filippo. And then when you introduce other things, what surety is that you are going to implement? That's a core. And then you are rid of the opposition. Now walanda kona pali bupunka, Umbawa, Ukabolala, and all that, which is very prominent now. And I think he has this consistent call for corruption. We know that the UPND, by standing today, has embraced all the types of corruption. Paid corruption, UPND. Grant corruption is in UPND. Institutional corruption is in UPND. But his call is that, where is the president? What is the president doing about all these problems? When I went to Munga and Dava, and Pama window, and all things are happening. And then people bring to your attention to say, Eva Chao Mabalakudia, Lerona Bakorona Kwakutunachan, Elo the anyway Kalapfezi. Nishi now Ulamolu bali muli chona muchirishan. I think that's what is the that's what we're asking. If all these illegalities are happening, why is the president? And we see him partaking in some of the illegalities. And I think the core about the Register of Society and many other things that are happening, which is it. Bakateka bali kui. Bakateka Mzambia. But where is he in all this picture? Elonga tualanda tuna babula mulu badiat no tamlelanda we know. For instance, and I think we keep on calling, but Sangawachiranda Gokuriande, I think by Ma and the leader of the opposition has also talked about it, where the president of the Republic of Zambia, whom the Zambians chose in 2021 August, is running technically two political parties, because he is the political running in the political party called UPND, where he was elected in 2021, but the political party called PF. He had directed the leader in this view, Balungu. But now he's the one controlling it. He's calling the show too of who to be the Secretary General, who to be the chairman. In Gawalefu maybe one of his sons will be acting as acting president in PF. And that will be observed as normal. He will even recognize in public that this is the acting president. Alaba, acting president, to that never acting president. That you have forgotten to recognize Jonathan as the vice president of PF. Where on earth? Come on, let's be serious. Where on earth?
Multi-party.
Yes. In a multi-party democracy, pro-politics. No, you forgot to mention that Jonathan is the vice president of the NAN. When did we ever elect Babaka in Nigeria to be the president of? Yes. Because even Article Cap 119 says the constitution of a political party should be followed. Now our president to put PF. President, we can just have a convention. No, not the way you have taken over. Yes, no. So, the media, in case you have any question, but if not to Kalipako, because I take a very mama shots. So, at this point, does the media have any question to ask? Okay, I don't know which media are you coming from, sir. Daily Nation, you are free to ask.
Basically, my question goes to Mr. Honorable Son. With the issues that you have highlighted on Mopan, and the fact that the minister made it very clear to say that he got big waters from the Attorney General to bypass Parliament in terms of the sale of Mopan, which they have said that it is not a sale. Don't you think that it is prudent for the Attorney General to resign from his position on moral ground for misleading the minister? Because the Constitution, Article 210, is very clear on that matter. And my last question goes to the leader, Minister Honorable Mwe. The President yesterday at State House, he mentioned one key issue which I think caught our attention. He said that when we came to power, many people thought that the fight against corruption was just something which was not going to be achieved. So you had to interfere with the judicial system by changing some of the court rules and practices. And this is one of the issues that have been raised there. Don't you think that it's wrong for the President to do that, considering the fact that the Constitution clearly provides for clear separation between the executive, the judiciary, and the legislature? Thank you.
Over to you, Honorable Sanga, then we'll have Honorable Munduvira to comment on the same.
I'll break my response in two parts. The first part is just to reinforce my position. My position is that the Mopani deal is a serious breach of the Constitution, and it cannot possibly stand. It is a breach of the Constitution. I also made mention of the fact that their attempt to justify it as a share subscription as opposed to a share sale, which that even advertised on the Lusaka Stock Exchange, itself does not also hold water. It doesn't hold water because even if it was a share subscription, when you issue shares in a company, whether limited or private, you know, you have to comply with what is called the principle of preemption. Preemption means when you issue new shares, only existing shareholders must acquire those shares. So an issue of new shares does not result in a transfer of control of the company under the principle of preemption. And the current provision in the current Companies Act is couched in mandatory terms. You cannot disapply preemption provisions. My second part of the answer is I will address you to the individual of Kabesha Muliro, who I know. I know Kabesha Muliro to be a solid legal practitioner. He is sufficiently experienced. I have handled several cases with him before. I do not think that this suggestion that he offered, you know, this opinion reflects the individual that I know called Kabesha Muliro. The Attorney General's chambers is presided over by the Attorney General's leader, the Solicitor General, and they've got several other, you know, lawyers. It may just well be that this opinion, so to say, was authored by baby junior officials. But if Kabesha Muliro authored this opinion, it flies into the provisions of the Constitution. It cannot possibly stand. It breaches the provisions of Section 144 of the Companies Act. It cannot definitely stand. On whether Mr. Kabesha Muliro must resign, you know, resignation is one's reflection of a conscience. If now that people have raised these very serious issues about the, you know, the appropriateness of this transaction of Mopani, after reflecting on it, Kabesha Muliro thinks that there was something wrong that happened, he should exercise his mind and he should consider the option of resigning as one of the options that he can take. But I know Mr. Muliro very, very well. I know Mr. Kabesha as a very senior, you know, legal practitioner. And in the cases that I've handled with him, this kind of opinion does not represent the intellect with which I have known Mr. Kabesha Muliro. Thanks very much.
Yes, thank you. The gentleman from Daily Nation says the president made a statement where he said they had to interfere, you know, with the system in order to reduce the period within which these matters are handled. Now, these are things that we've said in the past. We've always condemned the interference of the executive with the judiciary. We have always called for an independent judiciary. Now, if the president is saying they interfered, you know, with the powers and the processes at courts in order to, you know, secure convictions for those that belonged to other political parties, then it's most unfortunate. But it's also important that he made this statement because many Zambians have been very suspicious for a very long time. Courts have existed from time immemorial. The conduct of these courts are known. I mean, I'm a lawyer myself. Some of the outcomes and the judgments that are coming from those courts are simply shocking. They invoke a sense of shock in the minds of ordinary members of society. Yeah, but then before we even, one would even finish thinking about that, then the president makes this admission. The president makes a disclosure that they interfered. Yeah, because if they were able to interfere in the time through which these cases are processed, in what other instances has he interfered? Yeah, so it is very wrong. It goes against the doctrine of separation of powers, and whatever interference that is must be condemned by all. But like I said, I think it was very important for the Zambian people to understand how our courts are operating. Our courts are being dictated to. We've always called for an independent judiciary. We have said let the courts be independent, and not only be independent, but be seen to be independent. We've called for the financial independence of the judiciary so that ultimately they remain as arbiters, as umpires in these cases where the guilt are convicted and the innocent acquitted. Unfortunately, what we are seeing is different. We have very good examples today. Our very own political party, the case for the PF, has been ongoing for 1 year. For 1 year, this case has never been heard. Article 118 is very clear in the Constitution that courts should address the questions that have been put before them and not rely on technicalities to avoid those questions. But in this particular case, courts have been dodging using technicality. And a year later, the largest opposition political party has not been given their day in court. So when the president says what he said, it begins to make sense to many. People begin to realize that maybe this could be the reason why the courts are failing to move, because the executive has got a hand directly, in these matters that are of interest to him. But maybe what is also important is that, yes, in one way or the other that was achieved. But I think the fight against corruption demands more. As we speak now, the millions of dollars, the billions of dollars, the billions of kwacha, there are no investigations going on in the current corruption. If there are 10 or 15 members of the former ruling party that are being arraigned before the courts, sooner than later, maybe others will be acquitted, others will be convicted. What will happen to these courts? Remember that the fight against corruption starts, one, with efforts to prevent that corruption from happening. Secondly, the corruption that has happened must be investigated, and the people that are involved be brought to book. As we speak now, there is no Director General at the Anti-Corruption Commission. There is no board at the Anti-Corruption Commission. About 10 ministers are being investigated at the Anti-Corruption Commission. And yet, there's been no disclosure, there's been no report. Now, because there's been no report, there's actually competition amongst the UPND ministers. They're competing to steal because they're all looking for power and fame. That's the reason why there's a new scandal every day. If the Minister of Health walked away, for instance, as an example, with a scandal, the Minister of Energy says, they also did something. A Minister of Agriculture says, energy no ku, Tanzania, are you with me? So the Honorable Minister of Health said it all. He says, why are you bothering me? There are scandals everywhere. So that's a confirmation that, it's like allotting shares. Yes, others are allotting shares and getting away with it. Others are selling fuel. Others are buying maize, which has never come. So what we have, they are competing. So the loot and plunder, there's competition for looting and the plundering of the resources. Why? Because, Comrade Sanga said, constructively, the law has been suspended. There's nobody who's looking out for these criminals that are stealing our resources every day. So ministers now, whoever has an opportunity, if one has an opportunity to sell shares without following the law, they will just sell shares and begin arguing. One has shares to pocket some money meant for maize, they will just pocket it. If one has a chance to export power, when they are blackout, they'll export it and pocket the money. So this is what is happening. If one has a chance to get money meant for youths, in fuel tankers, they just start pocketing the money, giving to their wives and their children and everybody else. Yes, that's what's happening today. The question that one asks is, where is the president? Where is the system and where is the law? And remember, with all these things happening, the president is still saying they have sealed off loopholes for corruption. He says that one, and we're giving him, the list is endless. But at the same time, he's saying, we interfered with the system to ensure that we enhance the fight against corruption. How is that fight going to be enhanced? The many individuals under his government that are involved in these corrupt activities are still walking the streets. They have never even been called for questioning, as it were. So sooner than later, there will be nobody reporting anywhere before a police station or a court for corruption. And yet so much would have been lost, from our country. So we want to call upon Zambians to remain vigilant. There's been a problem. I think what what corruption is to you and me is not corruption in the UPND. That's why they're saying, as far as they're concerned, whatever is happening, they've sealed all the loopholes of corruption. There's only corruption on one side. Yeah, that's how bad things are. The reason why Comrade Ndeleki would stand up on the floor of the House and speak the loudest about 1.5 billion kwacha, but it doesn't talk about the $2.8 billion under their government. The 68 billion kwacha under their government doesn't talk about it. But he's excited with 15 flats. 15 flats may be worth $300,000-$400,000, but not the $2.8 billion. This is very important, and I will repeat, I'll say it slowly. Why should Katombora Member of Parliament Ndeleki get excited with 1.5 billion kwacha, okay, worth of assets that have been retrieved, okay? And he's not excited. He doesn't want to talk about the $2.8 billion. The other one is just kwacha. If you check, it will be about how many dollars is that? Yeah, the $50,000 is what? $500,000 is what? Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yes, that's 68 billion kwacha. So Ndeleki, because the 68 billion kwacha, which is $2.8 billion, is under the UPND, it's not corruption. It doesn't even excite him at all. Another 60 billion kwacha, in addition to the 68, does not excite him at all. The 13.5 billion kwacha doesn't excite him at all, but he's excited with 1.5 billion kwacha. Why? Because it was under, he believes this was under the PF. So there is need to reconcile these two positions. One, I agree with Honorable Kafwaya when he was on radio yesterday. There will never be, there has never been, and there will never be a government as corrupt as the UPND. Never. There will never be. And yet, they don't even know that they're corrupt. They don't even know that they're corrupt. That's what is strange. They actually believe that the next person is actually corrupt because they got 1.5 billion worth of assets. They've got assets worth over 120 billion kwacha in questionable transactions. But they don't think that is the problem. They feel so entitled. They think this is Zambia Limited. It's a private company where they can trade in shares. They gift their friends from Dubai shares worth 7 million and say, now it's 51%. Now I see why we have problems, even when it comes to transfer of these shares. We have individuals that think this is Zambia Limited, and it's just a private company where they can talk to a judge anytime and tell them what to do. They can change rules at the courts. They can get shares and give to their friends as a birthday gift, whatever it is. Okay? Zambia is a country. Those assets you're trading are public assets and should be subjected to the laws applicable. So I'm surprised. I was surprised to learn that the president thinks he has sealed all the loopholes. With all these reports that have been in the newspapers every day, the president still thinks there's no corruption in his government. So I think you now understand where the problem is. So even those ministers that are stealing, the ministers involved in corruption, be it maize importation, the export of maize, the export of power, the importation of fuel, and many other scandals. Yes, the first thing he convinces himself is it's not the parastatal. So then they go and start selling. They think that the Tazama pipeline it doesn't belong to the country. It's just a private company. They can give it to a friend who's a cadre and donor of the UPND to be the only one using. It took the IMF to intervene. The IMF had to intervene and say, can you liberate the use of that pipeline? So that's a level of corruption that we have under the UPND today. I thank you very much.
The media, I think...
Yeah. I'm just being reminded. Like consent judgments. Consent judgments under the Attorney General's chambers are still going on. All you have to do is to be a UPND cadre, because this is Zambia Limited. It's a company. Present yourself and say, no, when I was going home late in the night, a policeman pointed a gun at me. His name is Walia Kasonde. His man number, I want 10 million. Then the following, they say, okay, sit here. Then they sign and it's paid. I mean, this is governance made simple. That's how simple things have been. Money that belongs to the poor is being stolen every day. Remember how we defined corruption? It will happen through policy, it will happen through legislation and administration. So they'll call it consent order, you know, just to add some flavor. They'll clothe it with that and say we enter the consent judgment. But clearly what they've done is just stolen. They have just stolen money from the Zambian people. And there's even a judge on the other side who is going to sign. Because how would the judge say no? Okay? President Hakainde Hichilema told us from the beginning that he's very methodical. He was very methodical by getting people from his political party, his central committee, and put them in JCC. Okay? Go and look at the list. Okay? What was their job? Their job was to intimidate judges.
Former district chairman
Yeah, former district chairman for Ndola, UPND, is now at JCC. Okay? Other members of the central committee are in JCC. So the idea is to intimidate judges to a point where judges can't function anymore. Okay? Judges can only decide in one way. You cannot have a country like that. Countrymen and women, we do not have a country anymore. Okay? Yeah, so in case you're wondering, if you go and ask for a list, you're a journalist, go and ask Attorney General, go and find out a list of people that have been paid their compensation just the past 3 years. You'll be shocked. They're all UPND cadres. Okay? And yet, the president will come up and say, Zambians are very lazy. How? You have to go to the field on a hungry stomach to go and cultivate. You'll be given fertilizer in a meda. Yet your friend, who's just a cadre, can go and pick up 2 million kwacha just like that. On a consent order. And the president must say, you are lazy, but the other guy is hardworking, because out of that fraudulent activity, he can buy some animals, he can buy a farm, he can buy a vehicle, and many other things, and appear to be hardworking. I'm being reminded, and he marries a second wife, because he's very hardworking. He collected 2 million kwacha from nowhere. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Leader of the Opposition, and thank you for that wrap-up. And I would like to believe that maybe there's no more remaining. I think twali mwena wonse. Tabakateka niwa yeoda. If you have yeoda, the Bible says, from the abundance of the heart speaks the mouth. And bakateka basa munata apana alaka pusumu na fide. It's too much. I've been interfering in privacy. Let me just tell the nation that I've been interfering. You know, in the Bible, that before you look at the log, the speck in your friend's eye, you should take care of your log. There is a log in UPN's eye. Yellow consent judgment for those who care. You go and investigate 2023. They shared 703 million kwacha. 703 million kwacha. Takwa wapo mwachita budget exactly 703 million kwacha. Exactly leo mwapera na bantu. Bachita divide. Bachita bula fya bantu baingisha mwe wala bula poshinga. Yona wala bula poshinga. Exact takwa shara na mwanu mwe. 703, you go, you are a journalist. You can pick your budget. Babu limo fya baingisha mwe fya. Basa isanga basa mwana ati takufumira rimenda. Baingisha mwe fya bantu mchipendo. 703 bafuna mwe mpya chapo. Bakana no kwakana. And we are watching. And if that's not corruption, as I've said, there are people who have been waiting for compensation. I think council and other people can, for years. What emergency was it for UPND cadres to be sharing 703 million kwacha? People have been waiting. I've been on the queue. 208. Some of them from 208 and up to now. Tabapo kapwenda lama. Ababachila ngisha mfya chipendo. Bachitani ntuweno kani. Mkwa bande batamu sa mtatu pa kusana na chu chitewa end up. Thanks so much for me.